Hey Exiles, PoE Academy here, bringing you short but high quality PoE tutorials. Today is Flicker Day. I know that a lot of you guys haven't considered this skill a viable option for endgame, and the recent changes to boss life and damage don't really help, but I came up with a very nice build that can Facetank even T16 Metamorphs on a budget. I took my old Blade Flurry Insta-Leecher and adapted it to Flicker Strike. After some iterations, a monster was born. The build is so tanky and fast at the same time that even Fast AF couldn't keep up with it. Before we talk about how we achieved this, let me give you an idea of the pros and cons and a comparison to other builds first. There is a lot that this build offers to you. Its damage is very good and the build has a lot of scaling options. As you've seen, the clear speed is godlike. And it's very versatile, so if you want to play other melee skills or use a different gearing strategy, that's very easy to achieve. Obviously, the build has some disadvantages too. The damage feels poor with bad gear. The rage mechanic takes some time to ramp up, so you better don't get killed, and I wouldn't recommend this build for hardcore because sometimes random one-shots can happen. Regarding mapping, I would give this build a 6 out of 5 because the map clear is so insanely fast. For bossing, I would give it a 4. Survivability, also a 4. League start capability is not very good, so 1. It's very budget friendly, so 5 for a budget. And it has very good endgame scaling, so definitely a 5. This build uses a lot of mechanics. The most important one is Frenzy Charge generation. But what ways are there? The Flicker Strike gem itself states that the gem's cooldown can be bypassed by spending a Frenzy Charge. We link it to Multi-Strike, which reduces the amount of Frenzy Charges required to perform one strike to 1/3 or one Frenzy Charge every 3 attacks. For example, if we perform 6 attacks per second without multi-strike, we would have to generate 6 charges per second. With multi-strike, it's only 2 frenzy charges per second. The Flicker Strike gem grants a 0.25% chance to gain a frenzy charge on hit per quality on it, meaning a 20% quality gem provides a 10% chance to gain a frenzy charge on hit, which is not enough to sustain Flicker Strike solely. For instance, if we take the former example of 6 attacks per second, we would generate an average of 0.6 frenzy charges per second on a single target, but 2 are required. For monster packs, this might be enough, because if you hit, let's say, 5 targets each time in a single strike, you would generate an average of 3 frenzy charges per second, which is enough to sustain Flicker Strike. Okay, now that we know that we need an additional source of frenzy charges, what are viable options in 3.9? You can either use the Raider Ascendancy, a Terminus Est sword, an Aura Sacrifice sword, the Red Trail boots combined with the Golden Rule jewel, the Red Trail boots combined with Frenzied Skill Gem, or a Feral's Fur. The first option is not viable for this build since we want to pick up the Berserker Ascendancies for damage. Also, we want to use Bloodseeker Claw, which means that we cannot go for Terminus nor Auros. The damage we take from bleeding if we would use option 4 would be too high because it's calculated from our weapon damage and we would die very often from our own bleeds if no bleed immunity flask is up. We would counteract this with the Apep Supremacy Shield and going CI or the Slayer Ascendancy class, but that's not reasonable with a Marauder. You see, there are plenty of options available to make Flicker Strike work, but the only 2 that are reasonable for this build are Red Trail plus Frenzy or Feral's Fur. To push our defense, we abuse Soul Tether Belt. If you read its description, you find 2 important mods. The first one is Life Leech effects are not removed on full life, and the second one is Life Leech effects recover energy shield instead while on full life, meaning that once you reach full life, your life leech is redirected to your energy shield. Be aware that this doesn't work with Ghost Reaver. We also get 5% of our maximum life as extra energy shield, meaning that with 5k life we get an extra 250 ES, which is not very much. However, there's the glorious Vanity Timeless Jewel that, if the text contains the name Doryani, transforms any keystone in its range to the Corrupted Soul keystone. This keystone grants 20% of our maximum life as extra maximum energy shield, meaning that we now get a quarter of our life as extra energy shield, resulting in 1250 ES if we have 5k life. The offset is that 50% of non-chaos damage taken bypasses energy shield, which means that the energy shield only increases our effective life pool regarding elemental damage by half of its value. Physical damage gets absorbed completely by our energy shield. Another mechanic we take advantage of is Impale. In short, you can apply Impale each time you hit an enemy, and by default the last 5 Impales are recorded. Each time Impale is applied, 10% of that hit's physical damage is recorded before any damage mitigation is applied. Then, Impale deals the recorded damage to the target each time the target is hit, basically dealing double damage after 5 hits and 100% Impale chance. I won't go into more detail here, but if you want to learn more about the topic, there's a good video by MBXtreme which I link in the description down below. Believe it or not, but the single buff that made Flicker Strike viable for any scenario is Animation Cancel. With Animation Cancel, you are not being carried away anymore by Flicker Strike because you aren't locked in the animation. Instead, you can simply skip it and stay at your current position. In the past, the animation lock caused many deaths, especially in the mines and while bossing, but this era is finally over. For this build, a Bloodseeker's Claw is required. Right now they are very cheap, so you might get one with a decent corruption. I bought mine with power charge on critical strikes for 20 chaos. For Frenzy Charge generation, I would recommend the Red Trail boots, which cost some chaos. The Soul Tether belt and a glorious Vanity Timeless Jewel are not really mandatory, but I would strongly recommend using them. A good option for your armor might be Belly of the Beast for a good chunk of life and resistances. If you don't mind the money, go for a 6-link Feral's Fur. In case you don't want to use Soul Tether and the Timeless Jewel and feel safe enough, you might want to pick Rislatha's Coil instead for high damage and decent life. Another good item is Alt's Uprising with the Pride reserves no mana modifier for more damage. As magic flasks, you want to have a Curse Immunity Diamond Flask, a Bleed Immunity Flask and a Mana Flask with Freeze Immunity. For unique flasks, I recommend Taste of Hate for damage and defense, Lion's Roar for damage and Sin's Rebirth for damage and utility. In terms of attribute requirements, this build is quite easy to gear. The only stat you want to look for is 14 intelligence on any item. I have some intelligence on my helmet, but rings are also a good place for it. For your rare items, you want to look for high life and resistances on every item. On your helmet, you want to have the nearby enemies take increased physical damage modifier granted by Jagged Fossils for more damage. Craft or find one with the 40% increased Flicker Strike damage enchant or the 9% increased Flicker Strike damage per Frenzy Charge enchant. They both provide similar damage, but in my experience the former one is cheaper. You want to have flat physical damage and accuracy rating on your accessories. You're looking for additional crit chance and crit multiplier on your amulet if you're not using Alt's Uprising, and if you can, get chaos resistances in any slot because the bosses in 3.9 deal significant chaos damage. Regarding the rare claw, I prefer the Gemini Claw base because it allows you to drop the mana flask for a damage flask. The physical damage per second should be as high as possible and it should have decent crit chance. To give you a better idea, the one I reached level 91 with has 320 physical DPS and 6.5% crit chance. Your jewels provide a lot of survivability and damage. You always want to have increased maximum life on a jewel and fill up the other affixes with crit multi, crit chance and attack speed in order of importance. The basic 4-link setup for Flicker Strike is Flicker Strike, Multi-Strike, Melee Splash and Fortify. For a 5th link I'd recommend Impale, and as a 6th link you want to use melee physical damage. Note that Multi-Strike, melee physical damage and melee splash all have their own awakened gem if you want to spend more on this build. If you want to play other skills, that's perfectly fine. I found Blade Flurry and Cyclone to be powerful alternatives. Simply adapt your main damage setup to the gem of your choice and keep in mind that you don't necessarily need the Frenzy Charge setup anymore. As auras, we used Dread Banner, Precision level 7, Herald of Ash, Blood Sand and Flesh and Stone. Dread Banner is important for the increased chance to impale. Herald of Ash helps clearing, wielding Flesh and Stone with maim since the effect enemies maimed by supported skills take increased physical damage on both gems do stack. Remember to choose Blood Stance for more damage. With Alt's Uprising we would use Pride as well for more damage. We use Whirling Blades for mobility. Alternatively, you could use Flame Dash, and don't forget that Flicker Strike can also be used to cross gaps and obstacles if there's an enemy in the direction you want to go. Other useful gem choices are a cast when damage taken setup with Ice Golem and a defensive curse. I like Enfeeble, but you can also use Temporal Chains. Blood Rage gives decent attack speed, so you want to pick it up as well. A War Chief linked to Culling Strike helps to execute bosses. Don't forget Frenzy to refill your Frenzy charges while fighting a single target. In the passive tree, we make sure to pick up a lot of life in the Marauder and Scion area. Soul of Steel provides a significant boost to our defense. We pick up the Iron Grip Keystone and the jewel next to it once we have the Soul Tether belt and the Timeless jewel. If you have decent jewels, you can spec out 2 life points in the Scion life wheel and pick up an additional jewel socket at the right side of the duelist starting wheel. The Ranger area provides some offensive stats as well as an additional Frenzy Charge, which is not only more damage but also more sustain for a Flicker Strike. The Shadow starting area provides a lot of damage and another Frenzy Charge. For Ascendancies, we pick up Crave of the Slaughter and Rite of Ruin first for a lot of damage, attack and movement speed, and the Cannot Be Stunned passive. Then we pick up Flawless Savagery for straight up more damage, and as the last Ascendancy we want to either pick Aspect of Carnage or Blitz. Aspect of Carnage is better, but you need a better defense to compensate for the 10% more damage taken. For Pantheons, I prefer Soul of Solaris and Soul of Shikari, both to improve our defense. Especially the upgraded Soul of Shikari is powerful since it makes you immune to poison. For Bandits, we choose Elira because of resistances and crit multi, and the mana regen is also very nice for leveling. I leveled this character using the Gold Rim helmet, Wanderlust boots and the Onigoroshi sword. The helmet and boots provide decent resistances, movement speed and the perk that you can't be frozen. You can use Onigoroshi right from level 1, but apparently its price increased quite a lot recently, so I would rather recommend leveling with dual axes. Use the physical damage vendor recipe, which I went over in my League Starter video, to keep the damage up to date. Start using Sweep until you can use Thunder, or if you like it better, use Tectonic Slam. Follow the leveling trees in PoB. You want to pick up damage and life nodes as effectively as possible. Don't worry, you receive a lot of respect points during the storyline, so you don't have to pay extra money when you transform your leveling tree into your endgame tree once you have your Frenzy Charge generation set up. This is the time when you start using Flicker Strike. Last but not least, I want to go over some questions you might come along while playing this build. I can't afford Corrupted Claw for power charges. What can I do? You can either link Whirling Blades or Frenzy to power charge on Critical Strike. Where can I sink my money in? Buy GG items such as Alt's Uprising or a Watcher's Eye Jewel. Buy or craft a one-handed claw with 400 or more DPS. Try out Feral's Fur or get some of the new Influence Gloves or boots with very strong stats such as Intimidate on hit or Tailwind on crit. I die a lot. What can I do? Improve chaos resistances, get more life or damage. When Metamorphs spawn their adds, kill them first before going back to the Metamorph, or take the Blitz Ascendancy instead of Aspect of Carnage. I hope you've learned quite something. I really like this build and I want to play it until 95 or so. What are your thoughts? Please tell me in the comments down below. Thanks for staying with me until the end and see you in the next one.